All right, let's cut to the chase. Apple just released their 15 and it's hot. Literally, it gets warm in my hand. But there's one feature they added that is really exciting me more than anything that they've ever added into any of their phones. And that is Apple Log. Simply put, Log gives you more information that your sensor shot. It doesn't put any kind of filters, LUTs, or added color correction, which a lot of cameras will do in camera. It allows you to do as much as possible in post-production, kind of like when you shoot a raw photo rather than a JPEG. That's the simple idea. But rather than getting my thoughts on this, because, well, Apple gives us these phones, so there can be a bit of suspicion when you see all these people online talking about how much they like the phone.
I will not bow to any sponsor.
But I wanted to give you an unbiased opinion. So rather than my thoughts, I'm gonna go get a professional colorist, someone who works with Alexa and Sony Venice footage every day. And then when we come back, I'll give you some tips on how to get the most out of your iPhone Log footage. Scott, what I'm looking for today, what I want from your professional opinion, is skin tones. So let's pull it in, look at the dynamic range, throw some of your LUTs on here. Can you tell us about the setup you have today?
Yeah, so this is the advanced panel from Blackmagic Design. This is an HX310 from Sony, which is a mastering display. And yeah, we're gonna use a color space transform to get the material in. In 18.6, they just added the new Apple Color Space Transform. So we'll see right out of the gate what color skin tones look like.
And this is, Brad, what is this? This is a $40,000 monitor? $20,000?
Something like that.
How much would you say?
Approximately 40.
$40,000 monitor. And what is, that's like 30 inches? 30?
Can you just not touch it, please?
I didn't touch it. Scott, you've never worked with Apple Log?
No, first time. So the first thing that I'll do is an HDR node for exposure. And I guess we'll just kind of come to agreement of where we think that it looks pretty good in terms of brightness. Yeah. So when I'm looking at this, I'm not seeing like the algorithm that I would typically see of iPhone footage where I can tell that there's some processing or something that's going on with the image. This is more true, unmodified, which is something as a colorist I would want. Something you'd want to mix with other cameras that have a log signal.
This is actually the best thing I can do. This is an OLED 4K monitor. What is that, 70 inches, 80 inches? 85, so I can actually inspect it up close. Like,
don't touch the screen.
I'm not touching the screen, man. Considering this is like late night, like I'm noticing a bit of noise in the building here, but the detail's holding up. So far, is this the most impressive shot?
I do like the depth of the information we have in our shadow region down here. So to kind of take it from before to after, and the fact that we're not getting a lot of articulation going on, it's pretty smooth. The light from the cars is still registering as true. It looks really good.
When you say articulation, is that when it starts getting noisy and breaking apart?
The signal's been pushed way too far. In this instance, like we have stretched it, like we're getting this information back in the bumper, we're getting that plate detail, but it's not bouncing around. It's a smooth signal. And then even when we've gone in and been able to add grain, it's still, the signal still comes through is very clean.
And you've even saturated that sky. I mean, I'm genuinely pretty impressed.
Absolutely.
Don't touch the screen.
If I was given this timeline and wasn't told that this was iPhone footage, I would not really be able to tell. The amount that we're able to push this exterior nighttime signal is much akin to what you get with a digital cinema camera, so it's very impressive.
All that to say, you could throw it in with like some Alexa or Sony footage?
I think you could throw it in the timeline and the colorist wouldn't be abruptly jarred by material and knowing that it's going to be doing its own thing with an algorithm trying to make that exposure work.
There you go. That's very, very diplomatic of you. Okay, so let's do this. I want to put you on the spot. Detail, out of 10, what would you give it?
I would give it a 7.5.
7.5. Color, working with the color.
Yeah, I would give it like a 8 to a 9.
Wow.
Yeah.
Skin tone, let's say skin tone properly lit, what would you score it?
I would go 7 to 7.5 for that one as well.
Skin tone not properly lit, exposure all over the place.
5.
Yeah.
5.
Overall though?
Impressive.
Yeah.
Don't touch the screen. Don't touch the screen.
It's not, I'm not touching it. I don't blame him. When you spent $40,000 on a monitor, you do reserve the right to yell at people. All right, bye guys.
Yeah.
So Scott was really impressed with this footage. Of course, he's still holding it to the standard of the Alexa and the Sony Venice footage that we're shooting. And I would hope those cameras are better, considering I priced out getting an Alexa LF this year and it was gonna cost me about $120,000. Decided not to. But now with Log, as you can see from what Scott's saying, when you have control of the exposure, you're able to get more detail in the skin tones. That wide shot, I'm really impressed with the condos and the sunset. He was actually genuinely impressed. He was pushing the image by almost a full stop and it was still holding. So there's times that this can start to work. But first, what are the tips? How to get the most out of log? The first tip I'll tell you is get control of the image. I shot all this footage using just the regular app, and as you can see, there were some issues when the iPhone's AI starts taking over and it's trying to expose the sky and expose your face. It's just trying to do its best to give you the most dynamic range in a dynamic situation. But when you're shooting in a professional scenario, the whole point of being a cinematographer is controlling the image. You should be deciding what ISO, what frame rate, what shutter, what aperture. You need control of all of these things. You never want them to be doing auto. So there are a bunch of apps that you can use to do this. Filmic Pro is one. I've used it in the past. It does have a yearly membership fee that you have to pay. There's also Cinema P3 Pro, which is really cool because it uses the 2020 color space. But the one I want to focus on, because it's free, is Blackmagic camera. This one is great. You can work on log, you can change your shutter, you can change your frame rates. You have your ISO, you can see that's auto right now and auto white balance. This is a bit overexposed, and that's where you want to have ND on your phone. If you can get an extra attachment, I know Polar Pro has setups where you can add ND. This is really important. Again, it's that control. So if you're gonna be using this in a professional setting, definitely get ND. The Blackmagic setting is really fun. You can actually come in here and change your resolution. You can do 4K, you can even go all the way up to 444, which I highly recommend just plugging in a hard drive to your iPhone. It is pretty foolproof. You plug it in and you can see right there in that corner, it says USB-C. It'll record right to it. There's no extra steps. So get into a camera app, control what's happening. Don't let the iPhone choose it. One thing I should mention too with the Blackmagic app is you can load LUTs onto your camera, which is great, and you can apply them while you're filming. That's really helpful to kind of see where you're gonna be going in post-production. Which my next point, be careful with handheld with this. I find that the resolution's amazing when you're either on a tripod or if you can get some sort of gimbal attached to this, because the second that you introduce the shake of either if you're on the long lens or your footsteps, it will create that buzz because the active image stabilization is taking over. So get your camera steady. The next thing I would highly recommend is get enough light onto the person's face. This is the case with many cameras, but I do find the iPhone, if you're gonna be exposing to your highlights, your sky, you will start to get a bit more noise in the shadows. This is typical cameras, but when you have a sensor this tiny and the pixels are this tight, they can only receive so much light. So when you can, like the studio shot here, get more light on the subject, or when you see these shots of Landon, when I've reversed the direction, there's more light there on his face and we're able to do more with the skin tones. This is what you're always trying to protect. Next, have a good LUT. LUTs can be overused, but in the case of this iPhone, if you've never color corrected with LUT, I would highly recommend it. I actually just did like a couple hour long color session for our course Cinematic Eye with Sam Zook. And what I found really interesting with that is just how Sam will always start with a LUT to get the footage into a proper color space. We've included a bunch of LUTs. I've designed a bunch with Sam. If you want to try them out, you can. I designed one LUT myself for the iPhone that I'll be including in that LUT pack, which you can see on some of this footage here. When using the LUT, it's that balance of actually pulling back the saturation a bit so that it's working to feel a bit more human. And then I also find the iPhone, when I've been applying LUTs, it typically pushes the highlights a bit quicker. The log image on this is fairly bright, so I find I'm just having to recover the highlights, but because it's 422 HQ 10-bit, you can pull those highlights back without any degradation. Here's the irony is, some people are gonna complain, well, oh, if you have to add ND filter and stabilization, then it's not that good of a camera. Our cinema cameras, we have to do this. Every time I'm shooting with a cinema camera, I have to have a matte box with ND filters or the internal ND on. We're either using easy rigs or giant Ronins, all sorts of stabilization steady cams, stuff that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to stabilize the image. If you're gonna integrate this camera into a professional workflow, you need to treat it like a cinema camera. So ND, stabilization, and proper color correction, monitoring your exposure. If you want it to look like a cinema camera, you have to treat it like one. Let's take a quick look at adding some color to some of these images. I'm gonna scroll in here. Here's this shot of me in the studio, kind of the same scenario that we're in here, being lit with an Amaran softbox. I'm just gonna run up to my effects, and I've created this MB iPhone log. This is kind of a higher saturation image. Let's look at the basic corrections here. Yeah, as you can see already, doesn't look so bad out of the gate, but I would say it's a bit oversaturated and my skin tones here are getting a bit too bright. So I'm just gonna pull the highlights down slightly here and reduce my saturation. Yeah, that's starting to look a bit better here. All I've done is applied my LUT. It's in the creative tab here. I'm at 100 and I'm adjusting my saturation and highlights on the log image before those LUTs have been applied. Let's go just look at some sort of wide shot here. Here we go. Here's at the baseball game. I'm gonna pan down here on the widest angle at night. So again, let's grab my MB iPhone log, saturated. As always, I like to bring the highlights down. Actually, you know what I might do is I just might add a little curve. Really get that dark night sky in there. Making sure that my midtones are still up a bit. Yeah, honestly, this is like color correcting normal footage. I mean, if I'm looking at here, I don't really see much noise at all, even in the shadows. In the past, being on the widest lens on the iPhone at night here, this would have been a really noisy, muddy shot, but with the log here, it's very clear. Awesome, thanks guys. Appreciate you watching this. Let me know your comments below. I'm sure there's gonna be some Samsung users who are real riled up. It always feels like when you talk about iPhones, it's like talking about a religion or something. Man, people get so hyped up. Cameras and brands, it's like sports teams, religion, or politics. Just get shooting, tell a good story. But appreciate you. Thanks for watching this. I hate goodbyes. See you in the next one.